Hi, this is Liv Morgan, and you are listening to No One Knows, a deep dive podcast into the mysterious death of Joann Matouk Romain.
So we are back live currently with myself, Liv, Kellie, and Michael. And we're coming to talk about latest updates. One is Bill Matouk Jr. finally being arrested.
Yay!
And arraigned after tirelessly following the case from Grosse Pointe Woods to Wayne County to the AG's office to Macomb County, where it sat for a month at Macomb County. In totality, it was about 2.5 months before he was actually arrested, and there was a warrant put out for him.
Which is weird, too, because when we released the last episode, we were talking about how we released it that day. And we were like, yeah, there hasn't been a warrant issued. So we called Macomb, and then it was like 2 or 3 hours later that he...
But let's just be clear about how this transpired and how ridiculous it is. It bounced to 4 different departments before a warrant was actually issued and he was arrested, even though there was an eyewitness that day that said it was Bill Matouk Jr. that smashed into that billboard 3 times and then just took off behind the store and went back into Telly's, and nobody did anything. So in a normal circumstance in any other city, in any other state in the world, if you did that crime, if you committed that crime and there was somebody that saw you, you would have been arrested on the spot. But in this situation, it went to 4 different departments, and he wasn't actually arrested for 2.5 months.
Yeah, I feel like it was a pony show, like actually. And then Rudy had to go in and do a lineup.
Well, at the end of the day, if we didn't keep pushing it and you didn't keep calling everybody, they would have swept it under the rug.
Probably. Keith Wozniak still never called me
I
back.
do believe that it was the only reason that something was actually done about this is because media was on it and covering it.
Mm-hmm.
And if they didn't do something, it would have been obvious corruption. So they had to, because it was in real time being covered. So there was no choice.
Agreed. That, and I think there was a lot of, like you said, community uproar with it too.
Yeah.
People were like, what is going on? Because I think it's one thing when we talk about the corruption of your mom's case, but I think it's another when people see something happening in real time. And they're like, wait, this is actually occurring. Like, what is going on?
Yeah, and that was the first piece that was live like that.
Yeah.
And interactive.
Mm-hmm.
And that helped a whole lot.
This is the first, like, moving piece
Yeah.
that has kind of
Yeah.
happened. So, I mean, for now, he's got court. When we read what it says on here, it states that he's gonna get, I want to say, it says bond was set at $50,000, next court date's October 16th, but personal property of $20,000 or more, 10-year felony, and assault with a dangerous weapon, a 4-year felony. I mean, I don't think he'll get any of that. I think he'll probably get a misdemeanor.
But he was hit for some pretty strong things, so that it'll definitely stick on his record. Mm-hmm. And whether or not he actually goes to jail, he's still hit with a pretty strong stance for the first time being in trouble. So,
mm-hmm. But we're still not totally sold on the fact with it being in Macomb either, because yes, Pete Lucido did issue a warrant, but with that being said, remember, a distant uncle is a sitting judge. So it's like, at what point, is the conflict, too much? So for now, I mean, that's kind of where we're at with him. I do want to talk about something else that we've got a lot of messages on that we haven't talked about yet. We've got a lot of messages on, it was about a week after we released the episode of Billy being connected to the drugs that killed the 3 individuals in Grosse Pointe Woods.
No, we can. There's not much we can say because it's in progress. So
yeah. What we can see is not much.
And then that's the thing.
So everybody's sending it to us. They're like, did you see this? I'm like, of course I saw it.
So we definitely saw it. We're definitely aware. We saw the article. We read the article.
I actually called you guys and I was like, what the fuck?
Yeah, and...
Was it like 3 days after we released the episode?
It was 3 days after. It was that same week. It was the warrant was put out for Billy. You released your episode. The girl was arrested for the
in connection with the
drugs. So yes, we are well aware of the whole situation.
But there's nothing we can see.
There's nothing we can see. There's nothing we don't know much. I think we know what everybody else knows at this point.
Yeah. That and everybody kept saying, like, oh, do you vet the people that come on the podcast? It's like, of course. There was a paper trail for the individual who said that the drugs came from Billy. Like, there was a police report made. There was all of these things done. Right. So it's not like we just throw a bunch of stuff out here and say, yeah, this is what we think it's...
Yeah, everything that we've talked about and discussed always comes back to something that's...
But I think that what we should stay focused on is, yes, somebody was arraigned on it, and it didn't just happen in 3 days after you aired your episode. That's not the reason. That's not the reason it happened. It happened because, I mean, it takes more than 3 days to get this type of charge on you. It's not. This was an ongoing investigation. But what I will say is that we're super focused right now on where that individual that was charged obtained the drugs from. And I think that will come to light sooner than later. Actually, probably very soon. So we're just going to stay focused on that, and we'll update you as soon as more information comes out.
Yeah, as we know, we will share. And it just so happened that all happened in the same week.
Mm-hmm.
And
it would be like the minute I release something, then I'd have to go back and figure out how we're gonna come on and talk about the next thing.
We just, like Michelle said, as soon as we know more, we will share. But we're learning with everybody else how this is going down. So stay tuned for those pieces.
Yeah.
I don't think there's much I can say today, but there is going to be some updates, some national updates actually coming very soon in the next couple weeks, maybe even earlier than that. But we are working on a lot of things. There's a lot of new information that's come to light, just based on the events that have occurred within the past month, 2 months, but really in the last month.
And it's hard too, because we want to be transparent on the podcast, but we also have to keep the integrity of the case and the information that's coming forward and how we're reporting it and all of that, because we don't want to lose sight of anything.
And we've done everything so far has been as clear as we can make it. It's been black and white. Mm-hmm. It's, like you said, all with a paper trail. And we don't want to have to keep going back 10 times to fill in the gaps. So once we have a full story and a full, I don't know what I'm looking for, but...
Timeline,
thank you. We can have, we'll finish.
Mm-hmm. It's hard because, like you said, it's a real-time investigation. So we're working on certain things, but we're also telling the story of your mom and that timeline. So it's kind of like 2 running timelines at the same time. And we're trying to work at both, but like you said, making sure that...
Well, I also think that it's important for everyone to know, okay, yeah, our mom was murdered, and it's awful, and it was covered up, and that's awful, but that's not the only thing that's going on here. There's a reason why she was murdered. There's a reason why it was covered up, and there's something much larger behind what happened to her, and that's what we're not able to talk much about currently, but it will come out in more detail very soon.
Yeah, I agree.
But for now, like I was telling Love earlier, we can continue on with our story and how we got to the point we're at now. Mm-hmm. And it will be a complete whole story by the time we're done. Hopefully.
The eye roll.
Right.
Yeah, I mean...
It's just like when something happens and then in a movie they rewind and show you everything to get to the end.
Yeah.
And that's basically where we're at right now. So we've been trying to backtrack to see what happened, what did she know, what did she find out, why did she get killed, why was it covered up? And you just keep going down this rabbit hole until it finally all comes to fruition, and then you understand why all the things happened the way they happened.
Mm-hmm. And I think the biggest thing with this too is we've all talked about the uncovering of other things in the process of solving her murder, right? So like her murder, we're also solving the cover up of her murder, why she was murdered, but then all the other crimes that are associated with it, because obviously anybody that's listened to the podcast so far knows she's not the only person in Grosse Pointe that's been murdered or has died under odd circumstances. It's a small community, and at some point everything kind of is come to a point where it overlaps. So it's lots of stories intertwined in one.
Yeah.
Exactly. And as everything kind of unfolds, you'll understand why we're not fully expressing exactly what's going on, but you'll understand in real time soon, what happened, how it happened, and, what was behind.
It all makes sense.
Yeah, we got to be cagey right now. Yeah, cagey is important. And I think for you guys too, like that comes back to the trust factor. You guys have lost a lot of trust with like 90% of the people you guys have worked with. So
yeah,
you feel like you can't speak on anything or say anything or talk to somebody about anything because you've been crossed by lots of people you thought wouldn't cross you, and you thought the police would do the job that they were supposed to do, and they didn't. So,
and they still sit in their offices tuning into your podcast laughing about how they covered up a murder, which is really interesting.
It is so interesting when I hear people like through the grapevine to be like, oh, this person, they're like, oh, that girl's fucking crazy. And I'm like, but am I really crazy? Or like, if you just look at the evidence, like it's all right there.
It's always someone's crazy when we're telling the truth.
And you know what? Like, you guys gave me everything when I started, but when Michael and I drove to get that flash drive with all the court documents, like everything you guys presented to the court, that to me was like that was like the nail in the coffin. I was like, this is like crazy. Which is, it's everything we've talked about, but it's so in depth because obviously it was a court proceeding. So there was
the entire federal court document, the entire file.
Yeah, I think there's like 30,000 documents in it.
It's very damning, especially when you see it in writing.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's not saying that I haven't seen, but I've seen all of I've seen the timeline, I've seen the police reports, I've seen everything, but this was so detailed. Release other information to confirm to people, like Coast Guard records. That's something I'd love to release to people so they could see with their own eyes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And we
probably should put that up with this episode.
Yeah. So just certain specific things where...
Yeah, we'll drop pieces because if we, it's a lot. So little.
Yeah.
Would be good. So we'll put the Coast Guard stuff up with this.
The thing that was crazy to me, and I called you guys right after, there were two things actually. It was two voice recordings. One of them was Tim calling Michelle and like being like, yeah, you need to look at your Uncle John and like what's going on there. And it's like, but all this time he said she committed suicide. But then that was like, I think it said like 2014 on the recording. Yeah. So I'm like, that's 4 years later, all of a sudden.
It was actually, I think it was 2014. It was before he knew that we knew it definitely was him that was involved. And he was trying to, it was before we filed the lawsuit.
It was right before.
And he was trying to pin it on John, even though he said she committed suicide. So which one is it?
Yeah.
Did she commit suicide, or did John kill her, or did somebody that John owed money to kill? Like, which one is it? Pick one.
That day it was John.
Stay in your lane and pick one and go with it. But if you keep going back and forth about it, it seems pretty suspicious to me.
And that's always been Tim's deal this whole time. It's depending on the day.
It's whatever narrative works for them that day. Literally.
It literally is, and it's always been a cycle of the 5 different things, and they can never be consistent. So. And
what's crazy is when you guys started all of this, you guys wrote a list of everybody, and nothing has changed for you guys. Your guys' narrative has been the same thing the entire time. Mm-hmm. 14 years. Same narrative.
Well, because she literally told us before she died, because they were following her, and she knew it. So we're going to go based off of the person that was killed. But, so, yeah, it's not going to be different. And look at all the digging we've done in 14 years. There's never once has anything given us a reason to stray from the list that we had, either. Mm-hmm.
So I just think if somebody says, if something happens to me, look to this person, that's probably the person you should look at.
Listen to them, yeah. That's like a...
But if you're the Grosse Pointe cops, you say, we know him. He didn't do anything.
That's my buddy. He's fine.
So I was telling Michelle there was another thing in the court documents that I saw today, actually, that kind of caught my eye. And it was how many citizen complaints were towards Tim Matouk.
Oh,
when he was in his position at Harper Woods as a police officer. There were so many complaints on him.
Yeah,
this has been an ongoing squashing session by any department he's been at for his entire career. I mean, he's continued to have an abuse of power, and he's had multiple complaints on him.
And it's from day one.
Nobody seems to do anything about it.
He literally has had abuse of power since day one.
Yeah. And the other thing, too, that was, which the voice recording, which I'll post, it's kind of like choppy because obviously you guys got it through FOIA and everything, but it's not the best quality. But it was the Canadian authorities talking amongst each other when the fishermen found your mom. And they were talking like, there is an individual in the water, and they were talking like, oh, did somebody fall off a boat? Is there anybody in Amherstburg that's reported missing? Yada, yada, yada. And about 15 minutes in, there's a call from Detective McCarthy. And he's calling, and he's saying, I think that person you found in the water is our missing person from Grosse Pointe. And you can hear the lady from Canadian officials. She's like, we don't know who this is. We don't know what it is. We know it's a person. We don't know we don't know anything. We don't know if it's matching your description. You could hear it in her voice, like, what the hell is going on?
Yeah. And we'll remind our listeners that McCarthy was from Grosse Pointe Farms. And they had turned it over to Grosse Pointe Woods because she lived there. So McCarthy from the farms calls immediately.
I mean, it was like instant. And you could hear it and I think I texted you guys after. I was like, that like gave me chills.
Yeah.
Like, actually. That was...
Well, the farms had to call because they had to make sure it was ruled a suicide, so they ran over there, even though it wasn't their case anymore, and said she's mentally ill and suicidal with absolutely nothing to back that up.
And that's actually highlighted in the Canadian reports when they're talking amongst each other. They say that, like, he came over and it was specifically Detective McCarthy told us that the individual that they had,
Yeah, and then we asked him in the deposition, it says this right here. You told the Canadian authorities that. He goes, I didn't say that. Well, do you think they just made that up and wrote it in the report then? Oh, I don't know.
It was in multiple.
Okay. It was in multiple reports. They're not going to just make this narrative up that you said this. And then they went on to say, even though we're being told this, there's not enough evidence to suggest that this woman intended to take her own life.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like we said, this isn't the only case in Grosse Pointe where they ruled it a suicide despite evidence pointing at foul play.
Yeah.
I mean, look at David Widlack. The references between the cases have,
Very, very similar.
Very similar. And the individual who worked on his autopsy, Spitz, worked on your mom's. Spitz missed the gunshot wound to the head. There's just a lot. So, I mean, with everything, we are constantly working. We're working on things. I am going to, after this episode, kind of go back to our initial timeline of everything.
We can go back because I think some things are going to be a little bit more clear now. Up to speed, kind of been up to speed. A little bit more clear for certain pieces.
Yeah, because it's a lot of information at the beginning.
Yeah.
It's a lot. And it's like, how do you lay it out to where it makes sense for everybody, but you don't overwhelm them? So we'll go back. I think we were talking specifically about the top 10 or 15 things that really are like damning and like highlighting those things that are irrefutable.
Yeah.
And posting all the evidence with those specifically, evidence that really hasn't been posted before, and go from there. But
No One Knows podcast has created a wonderful website that
she doesn't have to
guess of all the criminals and suspects and everything else that this case entails. So if you go to Joann Matouk Romain.com, you will get to see the wonderful work of art that Liv Morgan did.
Thank you, Liv Morgan.
No, it wasn't that. I think that's a good starting place for people who are starting to listen to the podcast and they're like, this is so much information. We want to be able to see everything. We've listed like the bare bones on the website.
Yeah, and it's pretty interactive for that.
We try.
It really does show, everything, the main aspects of the case, who's connected to who's related to who. And
I'm such a visual learner, so like even faces to names, I think that was the biggest thing when I started with you guys. I was like, okay, who the hell is this person? How are they connected here? Where does this go? I'm like...
Yeah, there's a lot of moving parts, so that definitely helps.
A lot of Romains, a lot of Matouks. I need to figure out who's who. So... But yeah, I think we're moving in a good direction. I'm hopeful.
Yeah. And yes, we definitely see everything that's happening live.
Yeah.
And don't think we don't see it. But
and we see all your messages too. It's hard to respond to everybody, but we do see them all.
We do.
And we appreciate everybody that even, sends a slight message that they're praying or that they're sharing the podcast.
Just stay tuned. There's more information coming in the next couple weeks that is going to be, I think, pretty surprising to a lot of people. Maybe not surprising at all to some. But it's all happening in real time, so we will fill you guys in as soon as we can.
Joann's murder is bad, but the cover-up is 10 times more devastating. So with that being said, I want to go back. I want us to go back in the timeline and look at all the evidence that we have pointing away from suicide and that Joann Matouk Romain was murdered. The first few episodes of this podcast are really heavy on evidence, interviews. It's so much information. But now you guys are well versed. You've seen everything we've posted on our Instagram to support what we're saying. You've seen everything we have put out on the website, joannmatoukromain.com. But now it's time for us to pick apart. It's time for you to help us pick apart and to play a role in helping us get her justice. It's time for you to be part of a real-time investigation. We're not going to just be picking it apart again because everything that was laid out before has already been laid out. But due to the complexity of this case, we needed to lay a path first before we could do all of this. So, let's really dive into the irrefutable facts of Joann's case. Let's say the top 10 to 15 items that cannot be explained away, cannot be accounted for. And out of the 30,000 court documents, show you why this fight will not stop until justice is served. I'm not going to lie. I'm only 10 months in and I go through 14 years of facts, evidence, and reports. It's a lot. I still call Joann's kids and say what the fuck about this case daily. So I owe it to all of you. To all of you who have been here since episode 1. To all of you who have been with Joann's family for the last 14 years. We owe it to you to give you every piece of evidence that you can see with your own eyes. So, we're going to be sharing never heard before voice recordings, never before seen images, new interviews never released. If you think the season's ending soon, buckle up. We're just getting started. We're going to give you the roadmap to Joann's murder, but the roadmap of 14 years into a cover-up. How the suspects use public office for personal vendetta, fear, and intimidation. with our wins so far in this case, I think we could be moving in a direction where movement is happening and justice prevails soon. But up first on our list, on the paper trail, out of 30,000 documents, we're going to give you an idea of what we're talking about.
Hello?
This is Michelle. Can I help you?
Hey, Michelle, it's Tim Matouk.
Hi.
And, I wanted to tell you something in all seriousness. Hold on a second. First of all, that last investigator you had, that Bill, I thought he was a real good guy, and I thought your pick of Scott Lewis was an excellent choice, too. And I just want to tell you, I think you're in the right direction in looking into your Joann Matouk and his financial past. That's all I wanted to say. Okay, just to give you, my thoughts about that.
Thank you.
All right.
I appreciate it.
I realize this has been real difficult for you guys, and when I talked with Bill Randall, I thought really he was a good guy, and I thought in talking to him, he was very professional, and I think he had the right guy there, and I also respect Scott Lewis. So
yeah, they're both really, really good at what they do. So if there's anybody that's going to figure it out, it's them.
Go ahead.
I'm just saying, if there was anybody that's ever going to be able to get this to where it needs to be, it's them.
Yeah, and my opinion always has been that, whatever bad deals were going around or going down, all the arrows kept pointing to Joann Matouk somehow, some way. Obviously, I don't have the answers, because if I did, it'd be out there already. But somehow or another, this guy was too interwoven into the center of this whole thing, with all his dirty dealings and all his bad deals. And I think that the way it was presented yesterday, I thought was a step in the right direction in regards to his financial problems. And whether there was a vendetta or not, I have no idea. But I'm just saying, I think that's a step in the right direction. I just wanted to make sure I let you know that.
All right. Thank you for calling. I appreciate it.
All right.
All right.
Okay. Thanks. Okay.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.